Wagwan, everybody. Welcome to the Dis Affamie History podcast, where we'll be speaking about history and as well family history and how history relates in terms of Caribbean people for the present as well as in the past, and how in the past, what that does and brings forth for what we are going through at present and what we can learn from our history, from our family, and take that moving forward. So I do hope you enjoy the podcast. And if you like it, please ensure to subscribe, like, and review. Thank you.
In this episode of Dis Affamie History Podcast, host Wendy Aris explores the film Ireke, Rise of the Maroons, written and directed by Gbolahan Peter MacJob. Imagine Jamaica in the early 1700s, a world of power, betrayal, and unbroken resistance. The film, Ireke, Rise of the Maroons, pulls us right into that world, where language, music, and spirit collide in a story as haunting as it is beautiful. From the opening scene, graphic, raw, and unforgettable, to the whispers of coded songs and the resilience of the Maroons, Ireke, Rise of the Maroons, forces us to reckon with history in ways that are both painful and empowering. Today, we're diving into this extraordinary film. The parables woven throughout, the tension between surveillance and small acts of resistance, and the profound message behind the shifting tongues of patois, African languages, and English. Join Wendy Aris, sit down with Gbolahan Peter MacJob, to explore Ireke, Rise of the Maroons, its vision, its history, and the truths it dares to tell.
So I just wanted to thank you, Gbolahan Peter MacJob, for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you. You pronounced my name really well.
Oh, thank you for coming on to the podcast to talk about your film, Ireke, with the Maroon story. So before we start, can I just have you just do a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. My name is Gbolahan Peter MacJob. I'm a journalist and a filmmaker. I live in the UK and I work for the BBC World Service, but I'm now segueing into filmmaking where I want to tell important African stories.
I saw this film just recently, I guess August. Today is September as we're recording, but August 29th. And your film, it's set in Jamaica from 1728 to 1740. So could you share why this period was taken and what significance it holds in the broader history of enslavement and resistance?
I think I wanted to tell this story within that time span because it was when the rebellion, the Maroon Rebellion, was set up, happened within that space of time. And I wanted to establish that within the film of a group of African slaves who escaped, who fought back against the violence and mistreatment of the slavers and just felt like enough was enough, ran off into the hills. And when the slavers went to apprehend them, they had resulted into tribal tactics, what they used to do back in the continent when they had civil war between themselves and tribal wars between themselves. The things that they used to do, they went back to that. Of course, fueled by African spirituality, Obia, voodoo, Ifa, whatever it was. And so I needed to capture that moment, was why I decided to do it, to establish the film within that space of time of when that thing happened. So it's a work of fiction, but it's inspired by true accounts. So I wanted to bring it closer to home as much as possible, by stating those locations like this happened in Jamaica, because it was in Jamaica that this happened. And it was at the slave plantation that this happened, etc., etc. So hence why I dropped those little pointers there.
Mm-hmm. And before we go on, can you just define what Maroons are?
So, Maroons, according to historical account, was a name given to escaped slaves by the Spanish. I think from the word Maroon is where the Maroons come from. But Maroons, by definition, is the name given to the a group of African slaves who rebelled and escaped and then formed themselves into a militia and started to sack every slave plantation. They sacked it, they set their brothers free, and they became a force to the point that the British had to sign a truce with them. And of course, they were led by an incredible priestess called Nani. Some people say she's probably Nana, which is an Ashanti name, because most of the slaves were Ghanaians, present day Ghanaians, Nigerians, Igbos, Yorubas, a mixture of all those tribes. So, yes.
No, perfect. Thank you. And then your title, Ireke, itself is powerful. What does Ireke mean, and how does it tie into the themes of the film?
So Ireke is the pronunciation. Ireke in Yoruba means sugarcane. For those who don't know, sugarcane is a particular kind of fruit that grow up in our climate within the Caribbean and Africa, and it's absolutely delicious. But that was the plantation. It was during the Industrial Revolution in Europe, and sugar was a core business that they were making. So the sugarcane plantation in the Caribbean was where they used a lot of slave labor that they brought from Africa. So I wanted to use that title to spark a conversation off the cuff. Ireke, Rise of the Maroons. So not just Ireke, because Ireke on its own could be misconstrued.
Oh.
Historically, people use it to like a derogative phrase to describe the Caribbean, etc. Whereas I wanted to take ownership of that name and redefine it. So Ireke, just a Yoruba name for sugarcane, Rise of the Maroon as a rider, because I made this film as a local language movie. So it was important for me that the title be in local language as well.
Yeah. No, thank you. And of course, language, because I know when I was watching the film, that seemed to really pop out to me. And of course, the sound design, really does grab the viewer with dialogue shifting between patois, native tongues, and English. Was this intentional? And what message were you hoping to convey through that linguistic interchange?
I think I just wanted to throw everything into it and the kitchen sink. I wanted to, and again, like I said, it's a work of fiction. So here I am, I'm dealing with a Caribbean story. These are Jamaicans at some point after years of enslavement, right? However, they were African slaves when they got there. They didn't come from Mars. They brought them from Africa. They were Yorubas, they were Igbos, they were Ghanaians. So it was important for me to do the story in one local language, and in this case, Yoruba, because I'm Yoruba. So I do that. But then I felt like it would be such a waste not to have the local Creole, the patois playing up in this movie, because the slaves created their own language at some point to confuse the master. So I'm thinking, yeah, we need to have as much patois as we can. Also, just as a homage to the ancestors who came up with that idea, and I just felt like this film is so layered. This story is so layered that you can barely do everything. But I felt like as much as I can do, I will do. Any opportunity to bring that, let me bring that. So how about I let them speak patois when they are together? The challenge I then had was these are Nigerian actors who didn't have patois dialect. And it was a bit tricky to get that done. We spoke a lot of patois on set, but it didn't sound right. And the last thing you want to do is disrespect the community. So I thought we'll voice over the ones that we can and we'll leave the others. So it was important for me to have patois involved in the whole dialogue. And the sound design, as you said, I just wanted the kind of sound that will call on the ancestry, the local music, the drums, a cappella, all those kind of core African expression.
No, definitely. And then, of course, Olahan, the opening scene. It's both horrific and strong, almost like a Judas kiss. Yet it powerfully sets the tone and for agency and betrayal. Why did you decide to start the film this way?
It's interesting, that one. I'm glad that it came out the way it came out because I had multiple starts. Initially, I was going to start with the uprising and then go all the way back. That's how I wanted to do it. But my core mission, this is from my journalistic training, is I need to grab the audience. I know there's a lot of things competing with that space. So I think if somebody should switch it on the streaming platform and watch it, they need to be glued very early. And so in the course of playing up and down, I chose that sequence. And the reason why I wanted to have so jarring beginning was just to quickly set the tone for you to know exactly what you're dealing with here. We're talking about enslavement in its brutality, the rape and everything that happened. I want you to see it ASAP. And the dichotomy of how religion finds its way into this whole brutality. Like 1 minute, you've just been beaten up, have death. And now they're going to give you the gospel of Jesus to calm your nerves. I feel like I need to throw everything in it very quickly so that we know what we're dealing with. And you can then decide as an audience if this is for you or not. It's why I chose that start eventually.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we'll get to some of those other main themes, but I just wanted to talk in regards to the music. And of course, song played a vital role from spiritual resilience to coded resistance. How did you approach incorporating songs as both storytelling devices and messages for survival?
I think at this point, I have to give a shout out to my brother, who is a musician, not professional musician, but he plays multiple instruments. Now, we grew up in a very Christian home. So I play piano. He plays piano. He plays guitar. He plays drums, and he teaches music. He's an evangelical. So music is an integral part of our upbringing. So when we're discussing the kind of music that we needed, he wrote the song, wrote the lyrics, and said, "This is the kind of sound bites we need." And we have to, because initially we're like, should we do Afro beats?
Mm-hmm.
Should we like just go with the Vogue? What's trendy? Should we put like a nice Afrobeat song there? Should we do some Fela Kuti? We're just playing with ideas. And eventually we decided to go in that direction because we felt like we know for a fact that music will add value to the storytelling anyway. So it was something that we took really seriously and commissioned a group of very talented vocalists who executed the song that my brother wrote. And that's how I came up with that. I can't take full credit for the music.
Okay. Okay, no problem. And then, of course, throughout the film, we see parables, metaphors, and stark contrasts between the slave master's opulence and, of course, the enslaved people's life. Were these juxtapositions deliberate tools for deepening the story?
It was deliberate to go straight from opulence to poverty or whatever you call it. I wanted to establish that really quickly. It's not like we don't already know, but sometimes when you see it on your screen, it's a reminder. And in the course of making this film, when I was speaking to some of the local studios, there was almost like an argument to say, nah, not another. We've done all of these things. Then when I look at the Holocaust stories, you can never do enough of it, because up to now we still have discrimination ongoing. So on a regular basis for every film, regardless of how many of it that we've seen, there's a place so that we never forget. Do you know what I mean? So, and then I'm saying to myself, we cannot see enough of it. It's not for us to just go back and cry or have a pity party. Not at all. It's so we can continue to learn. And then this one is different. This one is about the rebellion, the fight back, the truce, the victories that our ancestors have. That's what this one is about, and so, yeah, those were things I wanted to establish very quickly in terms of how I wrote the story and how I kind of arranged the plot so that very early you already have an idea what you're dealing with and what message we're trying to pass across.
No, definitely. I couldn't agree with you more there. And of course, the other point is that the film highlights, constant surveillance of the enslaved. Why did you feel it was important to make this presence so visible to the audience? Because in most films, it's not.
That's interesting. I think it came from the place of research. For some reason, there was a part of me that just felt like it has to be done this way because, yeah, I'm trying to think what informed my decision to have surveillance throughout, and I guess it's from the research of having read extensively about how things were happening back in the day and seeing an enormous amount of pictures on the internet, in the library. There's just an ever presence of the slavers with their guns and their whip, either on horseback, watching them work in the plantation, on the balcony with their gun and their hat in a relaxed atmosphere, but armed anyway, just in case anybody tries anything funny, they can shoot them from afar. And I think once I got that established and I saw that they were always present, regardless of how small they were in numbers, I thought, in the course of writing, I always thought, yeah, I needed them to be there, which then speaks to the level of planning and execution for our ancestors to be able to pull off that rebellion. They must have planned and timed it with military precision to say, this is when we strike and this is how we move. And anticipate that there's going to be gunfire. And as you can see in the film, I made sure that it wasn't unbelievable. I tried to make it as realistic as possible. So they had moments when it could be sloppy or not thought out through, but the bottom line is we were ready to go. And it was like, once it was go time, there was no stopping. The revolution had begun, and here we are today as a result of that.
Exactly. And then, of course, the film does, of course, have moments of small but meaningful resistance. Singing to protect one's spirit, reclaiming time, even the irony of church services translated across languages. How do these quiet acts shape the larger narrative of rebellion?
Because, all this, even the big rebellion or the big hoo-ha, it starts with small projects, small thinking, small plots, small plans, So I know that in their little pockets, when they gathered and had a conversation, they thought it through and got people to believe in them and then went out there to execute it. So I felt like, again, I wanted to capture it in as closer to accuracy as possible, but also I wanted it to be realistic. You don't want to create some false vibe or false impression or some kumbaya story that's not realistic, because then that would do it a disservice for the young people who didn't know that this happened. I realized even a lot of older people didn't know that this happened. I saw people in their 60s and late 50s. I said to me, I'm hearing this for the first time. So, but for the young person that's coming across my movie, I don't want it to just be a fictitious story. I want them to realize how methodical our ancestors were, regardless of how dehumanized they had been. Almost like second to, almost like inhuman, where they have no regard for them like that. But to be able to, even in spite of all of that, come together, plan, plot, execute, have many successes here and there, and then go out there and do the big one. Again, I just wanted to represent that as much as I can.
Yeah. It starts small and then it gets big, right? So
yes, completely.
Definitely. So I'm Bulhan with the Maroons as they appeared as key figures, with Nanny portrayed as the healer and the leader. How did you balance the historical accuracy of the 1739 Maroon Treaty with the film's dramatic storytelling?
So with that aspect, I only scratched the surface because I realized that this film is a gift that keeps giving, and there's more where that came from. So Ireke, Rise of the Maroon is an introduction. Once we start speaking to the big studios, we have the capacity of making this a series where we can rinse out the storytelling very well. The nanny is not somebody you can reflect in 2 or 3 or 4 occurrences in the movie. She's an entire institution whose story needs to be told. really well. So there is that. The entire Maroon exercise, the military execution of the Maroon, it's a beautiful story of revolution that needs to be showcased higher than the film was able to reflect it, And so what I've just done so far is introduce to the world who these people are through my film, and then getting ready to make a sequel and possibly a series once we get big studio buy-ins. But from the level of indie and for the very shoestring budget that we used to film it, I really couldn't do as much justice as I would love to. I didn't want it to be sloppy. So in terms of accuracy, again, it remains a work of fiction. But the bottom line is, from the accuracy aspect of it, the nanny did lead this rebellion. She was the one that inspired them, and they had confidence in her because they felt like she had spiritual powers, and that they were going to be guided and nothing was going to happen to them. So she probably, I've consulted the oracle. It's all going to be fine. Let's go. So they took her word for it and they went out to do it. And so I know that's in the books historically. So I reflected that in the movie and just left it there nice and sweet.
Which is great. And, the themes of betrayal and manipulation reoccur in the movie, like Simon revealing his plans for personal gain or the priest's hypocrisy with his mixed race child. How do these subplots speak to the larger power dynamics you wanted to expose?
Apart from just the power dynamics, just the bits again that we try not to speak about in terms of the complicity of our people as well in the course of this horrible time in our history, that our own family members, our own community members played a role, in some of the misfortune that we went through. So I wanted to establish that. Is why there's a couple of plots of betrayal, because that had to happen before they were able to get into our system. There was a crack, which was caused by betrayal. And I wanted again to make sure that this storytelling was as fair and balanced as possible. So it's not tilted to one side where we just want to blame the West for what they've done, which the blame is apportioned adequately from the course of the film. But then also, let's have a moment to address community members who played a role in that, who sold people out, or family members who betrayed their loved ones, or even within the slaves, the house slaves who would rather make the master happy and mistreat their fellow kinsmen. All of those things, again, in the course of my research, I found out that these were the case, so I thought I wanted to reflect everything. I didn't want it to be one way. I wanted it to be balanced.
No, definitely. And then on the other side of that, the revenge and anarchy scenes, such as, the mistress meeting her fate, are striking. What emotions or reflections did you hope to stir in viewers through these moments?
I think from a film audience angle, I think this is an interesting question regarding who the target audience is actually, because if an average Black person is watching that, right? And for all the optics of slavery that we've seen, the whipping, the hanging, the torture, having dogs bite people to their death, all those things that we've seen, we've barely seen the reverse of where the slaves have the upper hand. So, in the course of where the mistress met Waterloo, I mean, shout out to Alex Franklin. She's a brilliant actress. Did you see her when you came? She's amazing, isn't she? Just looking, even where I sat on the director's chair, watching the screen, seeing the way she was screaming when the big slaves got hold of her and pinned her down, my heart was racing, because it felt like something horrible was about to happen to her in real life. So I think in terms of the optics, it's just, again, because this was something that actually happened, but has never really been captured on film. I wanted the world to see those glimpses. If we watched Roots and we've watched Django and all of that, and we saw the mistreatment, we're used to that image, black people suffering and all of that. We know it's a movie, but we've seen it before. But we've not seen the other part where the slaves fought back. So I say, well, since I have this opportunity as a first person to capture the Maroon story on film, on feature film, I need to pay homage to all those bits unequivocally and unapologetically. So that's what I was hoping to achieve from that. But in addition to that, I wanted to stir the spirit of pride in terms of when you fight back. So the same people that have been downtrodden, battered, beat up, bruised, broken, for them to then find a new lease and fight the oppression. I felt like you can have all the sound bites in the world and write all the hashtags in the world and make all the t-shirts in the world. When you capture things like that on film, it resonates and it's different. That's what informed my decision to do it that way.
Yeah, which is good. I mean, it's a real strikingness. And as I said, there was many things that came up in the movie. And, as we, now come to a close with this discussion, Bolahan, would you, the film definitely feels very layered, with spirituality eroded, traditions discarded, yet resilience persisting. Is there one message you'd want audience to carry away about the movie? What would it be?
To reconcile with our history. There's a renaissance happening right now. The African renaissance, the call to the motherland. We've heard about the year of the return. You have the likes of Spike Lee, Ciara, visiting the continent of Africa. This film is to remind you that this is the time of the Renaissance, and the Renaissance in its entirety. Looking at Africa more favorably as a beautiful tourist destination, a place you can relocate to start a new life, but also looking at the African creative sector as a place to come and invest in so that we can tell African stories and not rely on the global north to decide what we can say or what we cannot say, but to also see the continent as a place of possibilities. So to answer your question, what I'm hoping people can take away from this film is a new sense of pride. To know that our ancestors didn't just lie down to be crushed. There were stories about slaves who jumped to their death. Most of them Igbos who were saying, die first before you enslave me. It must be a next level of pride. It's like quitting your work to say, I quit. They quit rather than go to a place of servitude, bound in chain, And for me, it's just for us to find that sense of pride now as Black people, to just be at peace, knowing that we don't really have anything to prove. We don't need to have any chip on our shoulders. We can be proud of what our ancestors did. It's on the record that they fought back and they had some victory. We can take some strength in that and know that as we journey on in life, we don't really have to feel like someone's coming for us. And if there's anyone coming for us, we need to be rest assured that we have what it takes to fight if we have to, because it's in our DNA, But above all, the gap between Africa and the Caribbean, we need to close that once and for all, because we are brothers or cousins, however you want to put it. And this divide and conquer thing that's happened, now that have all this kind of beef, we need to remember that in history, we were together. It's how we had victory. So even when you hear that African Americans have some issues with Africans. I'm like, how on earth is that even possible? You are us, we are you. We're trying to be like you. You know, you inspired us growing up. So, and now that we're here, let's just find a common ground, coexist and be strong.
Yes, definitely, because there is definitely a lot of work that's being done to bridge that connection
Yes.
from the continent to the Caribbean. So I do want to thank you so much for coming on and speaking about your film.
Thank you.
It was great, but I will make sure all information is in the show notes so people can connect and follow through. So again, Olan, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
Pleasure. How do I pronounce this program?
It's Disafemi.
What does that mean?
This is mine.
This
So
is
this is
mine.
my history. So when you're
Disafemi.
saying it, you're just repeating it, saying, this is my history.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's a great title because this is our history. You know, the Maroons story is our history. It's not just the Caribbean story. It's an African story. And I feel privileged and honored to be the one to tell it first. So I'm very grateful for that. I feel like the ancestors gave me a task and I hope I've done the task to their satisfaction.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Hoped you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and write a review for the episode wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you.